What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a bonus episode brought to you by the supporters of this show over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. And if you would like to learn what it's all about when you become a Patreon supporter, the link to that information is in the description of this episode. Now, let's get right into it. Let's not wait. So, if you have lived under a rock for the past couple of days or weeks, or if you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your punk ass out of here. But there's been a lot of controversy. So, DJ Academics has said the most, but that should be a surprise to most that know him. Here's the story. So DJ Academics on a Twitch stream said, and I quote, "Them old rappers, man. Have you seen any of these old rappers who be like, yo, they're the foundation of hip hop really living good? Them N-words be looking really dusty. I kid you not. And none of y'all try to come for me because I don't F with y'all N-words either. So I'm just telling y'all the truth." So when he made those comments, well, he opened up a can of worms because, of course, the hip hop community is very vocal, very active. It is the number one streaming genre, hands down. So of course there would be a reaction, especially considering this debate. But the first of the dusty rappers, I guess, to respond was none other than LL Cool J, who is, if you listen to my podcast, is the GOAT. Do not debate me. I got a whole episode about it. I'll post it again. But far from being dusty, and probably is the best example of an old school rapper who had major success throughout the years, throughout the generations. But essentially, here's one quote from LL Cool J, who went live on Instagram Live, which he doesn't do, to address it. Now, really quick before, well, here's the quote. Let me just say the quote. I know you've been looking for the quote. LL said, "Don't think because someone failed to get money, they didn't contribute to the culture." Now, obviously, he said a ton of things beyond that, but you should go to his Instagram Live and check it out because it's pretty good. You should hear from the God himself, okay? But it was fitting that LL would be the first to step out there in a big way because he probably has the most credibility to speak on it, right? Not only being an old school rapper, but his Rock the Bells initiative, that's what you could call it, because it's not just a Sirius XM channel. He just put on a summer concert, from what I heard was sold out, featuring a number of old school acts with guests. That was very successful. He has a clothing line and all that. So he's been championing the old school in a proper way. So it's fitting that he would answer somebody like this. Now, I know you're thinking, well, who is this cat anyway that he needs to be answered? Well, DJ Academics, you must admit, has built a platform for itself with his media, as far as, I don't know about his DJing, but his podcasting, his streaming. His following is pretty crazy. He makes a lot of money. I don't know if he could walk the streets by himself, but so Tom Cruise can't walk the streets by himself, or maybe he can, who knows? But nevertheless, he is sort of like an influencer in a lot of ways. Influencers to a point where, we're talking about him, but we'll get to that, in my opinion, on that a little bit later, because I don't want to make this too long. So that's what happened, right? So every podcast, every hip-hop, know-it-all, old, young, whatever, has chimed in on social media, debated, then went to Clubhouse, Spaces, everything. And now you have a podcast from me. But I have more, because this is what I do. So recently, with all the backlash that DJ Academics received for his statements of calling the pioneers dusty old rappers, he recently responded to the backlash with a 48-minute episode of his podcast entitled Off the Record, addressed or titled as Letter to LL Cool J. And here's a couple of quotes. Shout out to hiphopdx.com. This is where I'm getting most of this information from. He said this, and I quote, "I feel like the last generation, multiple generations of hip-hop artists has failed the new generation. That's why I think it's the blind leading the blind. That's why I don't think older artists should be criticizing or really have a leg to stand on, even if they call yourself pioneers, to criticize how new artists are moving." Now, academics also said, in regards to, or basically his letter to LL, that he felt that his comments were more his original comments were more tongue-in-cheek, and they were blown out of proportion, way out of proportion, according to him. And so, let's take all that information and unpack it, right? First and foremost, my opinion on what he had to say, it was just pure ignorance, to be honest, pure ignorance. You would not be able to do anything you are doing without these dusty pioneers. You just wouldn't. There's always someone who laid the foundation, took the sacrifice so that you can have the opportunities you have today. You can't roll like that. And more importantly, you can't roll like that when you know that you have an audience that is impressionable and will go with what you say, right? It's irresponsible to treat the genre in which you benefit from in that way. Only we in hip hop would disrespect the people who paved the way for us in this game in that way. Even if they're disrespectful to you, you know how they be like, man, you need to respect your elders. And you may be thinking like, well, he disrespected me. But at the end of the day, that man came up in a different time. That woman came up in a different time. And for some of these rappers who ain't lying, some of them are dusty, but that's because they didn't have the benefit that some of these artists came out at times where there wasn't no record deal. We was just doing hip hop. So there's no money from that. And then some of them came up where if you didn't have a single deal or a record deal or album deal or multiple album deal, that was the only way you were gonna eat. In some cases, that deal didn't even mean anything. Doing shows based off of what you did was the only way you were gonna eat. And we know that the majority of hip hop, and when I say majority, I'm saying 99.9%, comes from the ghetto, comes from poverty. Therefore, you are suggesting that back when in their day, when the old and dusty back in their day, that they automatically have financial literacy. You know, academics, like we know, that is not true, unless you are not from where we're from. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't take the time to understand the dynamics of the ghetto the way you think you do. So that's where I call it irresponsible, right? And in a lot of ways, right? So when you look at all of that stuff and you say your stuff, you still make that statement, it doesn't make sense. Now, obviously, someone like LL Cool J is an anomaly when it comes to cats like that. He's a shining example of the minority when it comes to old school artists who had the business acumen to continue on, to be successful, to get opportunities outside of hip hop, to eat, so they can continue to make hip hop, right? MC Shan is the complete opposite. You know, Curtis Blow needed a GoFundMe to save his life, right? You cannot make fun of these cats because Curtis Blow was the man at one point. Whoever you call the man today, that's what Curtis Blow was. That's what MC Shan was with The Bridge, right? LL Cool J, Run DMC, Grandmaster Caz, Furious Five, all these cats, right? Now, to address his statements about why he feels that way, I don't disagree with what he's saying right there, because there's a lot of truth to it. There's a lot of old school hip hop artists, and I'm not talking about the pioneers exactly, but some of them too, and some of the fans who have this gatekeeper mentality, right? They don't like the new music. They think it's lazy. They think they lack the craft, right? Whether you disrespecting the old school or not, they call it garbage. It's only but for so long a new generation that's trying to find their way are gonna allow you to call them garbage. And when they turn around and look from side to side, they don't really see you where they are. They really don't really see you getting the money they get. They don't really see you getting the validation they're receiving. So how can they be garbage? That's how they'll look at it. So at the end of the day, the blind leading the blind, sure, that's absolutely true. But it's still irresponsible for him to say that, right? LL Cool J didn't respond and say, your generation's garbage, right? He responded like a grown man to this. And I think it's a number of things, right? It's not just rappers, right? It's everybody. It's radio, in which he addressed. He said some things about Ebro, and I was just like, well, I don't disagree with him because I've never liked that dude anyway. But it's irresponsibility on all sides when it comes to this genre of music. And it's the reason why we don't benefit the most from it. It's the reason why our legends look dusty, right? Because we don't support one another. It's the reason why some of these younger artists will never worry about being artistic or being a skillful. They will only chase the bag because there's nothing I can do to impress these old cats who said I was garbage from day one. Right? There's no influence level there. So at the end of the day, it's an important conversation to have. It's a conversation that's been going on for a while. It's something that I've talked about numerous times on Hip Hop Now podcast. Subscribe wherever you get this podcast. But at the end of the day, DJ Academics was completely ignorant in his statements, completely ignorant to say something like that. But more importantly, probably smart about getting everyone to talk about him. Think about that. That's going to do it for me. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Vegas World INC. Also know, subscribing to this podcast is just one step. If you like what you hear, well, share it with people you know so they could check it out. And check out my other podcast called Hip Hop Twitter, where I react to dumb tweets that I haven't seen in real time. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.